Don't shoot. I'm just praying here. The mask is to help keep you and me safe. Not hurting nobody. Resisting no one and nothing. Can I put my arms down? I need to help get up. Good morning. Reverend Dwight Lee Walter here at the Congregational Church of Patchogue. Welcome once again. I'm going to have to take this mask off because I can't breathe. Just had a flash. I wonder how many people clicked off right there. As regards this church, as we are in this COVID era, we have been meeting. As you may know, I was appointed by the governor to his Interfaith Advisory Council on church and house of worship reopenings. And in consultation with them and also with talking to fellow leaders of the Congregational Church of Patchogue, we don't know. But at the moment, we're prepared to possibly have this house of worship closed until September. Not good news to us, maybe not good news to you, but that's what the possibility is that we're looking at this time, and we'll see what happens then. Good news, though, is a week from today, not tonight, but a week from today at 10 a.m., we're going to have a service again here, and then at 7 p.m., next Sunday, the 7th of June, at 7 p.m., we're having the spirituality of Cat Stevens, also known as Yusuf Islam, also known as Yusuf. It is the 50th anniversary of the release of Tea for the Tillerman. He has some amazing songs. So it'll be via Facebook Live, like here, and we'll have Zoom-in performances by several different people. I should have written down their names: Rory Kelly, Katie Perlman, Toby Tobias, Dave March, Brian Gallo. And if I'm missing somebody, forgive me. Okay, so we're going to have an interesting service here, and it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to be inspirational, and it's going to be real. So there's a song that came to my mind several days ago, and I contacted our music director, Craig Coyle, and singer Kathy Youngquist, and said, could you play this song for us? It's been played forever, but it seems so appropriate at this time, about who gets the goods, who doesn't, who's on the ark and who's left to swim on their own, who's included, who's excluded, who's with us, who's not, why. All of those things were coming to my mind, and the following song, about to be sung by Kathy Youngquist, is what popped in my mind immediately, and I hope you enjoy it.
The road is long, with many a winding turn that leads us to who knows where, who knows where. But I'm strong, strong enough to carry him. He ain't heavy. He's my brother. So on we go. His welfare is my concern. No burden is he to bear. We'll get there. For I know he would not encumber me. He ain't heavy. He's my brother. If I'm laden at all, I'm laden with sadness that everyone's heart isn't filled with the gladness of love for one another. It's a long, long road from which there is no return. While we're on our way to there, why not share? And the Lord doesn't weigh me down at all. He ain't heavy. He's my brother.
Thank you, Kathy. It brought tears to my eyes. I bet it was hard to sing it. I raised my daughter, Celeste, in Manhattan. She is now living in San Francisco as an adult with a husband and 3 young children. But I want to go back to about the age she was when her twins, who are now 8, she was, let's say, 7 or 8. And I was walking her home from school. And like everybody, get into habits. You turn right at this intersection. If you have to think about it, there's something wrong. I just followed my gut instinct. So we're walking down the street, the same side of the street we always do, past the same stores we always do, pretty much saying hello to the same shopkeepers we always do. And all of a sudden, I stopped, and I pulled my daughter, and we went to the other side of the street and started walking up toward home from there, on the other side of the street. We'd never done this before. So my daughter Celeste said, "Dad, why are we on this side of the street?" And I said, "Well, I wanted to look at something in the store window." And she looked at the store window, and I turned around and I looked at the store window. And in the store window were mannequins wearing bras and panties. And then my daughter looked at me and shook her head like, "You didn't want to look at this store window." And she looked back at the other side of the street that we had come from, that we always walk on, and saw 4 black teenage boys. I couldn't say anything to her. I couldn't say anything to myself. I was shocked at what I had done. And the challenge was not to push the thought behind me. The challenge was to accept that I was so privileged as a white person in Manhattan, where white people have been in a minority since the late 80s, that I crossed the street at the sight of 4 black teenagers who were laughing, maybe coming home from school, or I don't know what they were doing. And I thought, that was racist. And I did this in front of my daughter, who's 7 or 8, and she saw it. It impacted on her. But what is worse than the shame of her father and her concern about her father's actions that seemed to be race-based, what would have been worse is if she had not noticed it or said anything to me. And we had kept walking. And through my being a good person, would have started the growth of internalizing this systemic racism in my daughter that she had witnessed, unconsciously perhaps, in the life of her beloved father. 30 years ago, I still tell that story, and I'm still a little ashamed to tell it, but I thought, what is worse, me carrying a bit of shame about the fact that institutionalized systemic racism is in me? Of course, it's like coronavirus. Everybody's got it, but it won't get me. I mean, that's like delusional. Of course, white middle-class guy. Of course it's in me. How could it not be? So the challenge was to overcome it. I have to live into this, confess it, and turn it from a source of shame or something I want to act didn't happen, or explain it away. Well, you never know nowadays. This is Manhattan, after all. 4 black teenage boys walking up the street, acting out a little bit. I mean, and I have a little girl. I had to protect her. I could have, and I just said, Dwight, don't lie to yourself. Just let it in. And then the way to avoid the shame is to commit to changing it. Preach about it. Talk about it. I wasn't an ordained minister at that time. To this day, I have told that story in black churches, synagogues, Islamic centers, and here, and now with you. And I see the same thing happening as we're going through my news feed day after day after day, and I see somebody who's murdered because he's jogging while black. I see just, whatever, is it days or maybe a week or 2 later, I don't know, somebody who is a bird watcher in Central Park and asks this woman to please put her dog on the leash because it's a city park. And she calls the police on him. This African American is, and she got fired from her job. And he's to talk to her and forgiven her. It was just like bird watching while black, jogging while black. And when I put the face mask on, I have thought, because I've seen this kind of stuff, I thought, wow, if I was black wearing a face mask, walking past a jewelry store, I might get some eyes. Now, is that the middle-class privileged Dwight Lee Walter, white guy, trying to fan the flames of this story and make much ado about nothing, as Shakespeare said? I don't think so. As a matter of fact, I know not. The bird watcher ain't heavy, he's my brother. The jogger ain't heavy, he's my brother. The woman who was shot in her bed multiple times in a supposed drug bust, and her boyfriend was laying next to her, sleeping while black? And my job, because I'm not in that situation, is to ignore it. I can't do it. There will be people in my own church, I'm sure there are people on this Facebook Live presentation who have clicked out already. Nah, time to grill the burgers. Okay, I understand that. And we're in the context of COVID. So imagine, or maybe you don't have to imagine, you're a person of color in an urban area that is not up to the middle class, and you're being told matter-of-factly that you are vastly disproportionate in the illness, lack of insurance, lack of testing, and death from COVID-19. Oh, okay. So I'm a jogger, bird watcher, bed sleeper. Coronavirus is killing off more people that look like me, people of color, than white people. But, this is just, I can, and don't be careful where you wear your mask, otherwise you look like a burglar. Okay, I can, and then all of a sudden, George Floyd. 9 minutes is a slow murder. We've seen it. And then what's happening now, amazing to me, is that as I post about some of the things I'm speaking to you about today, posted around the various social media platforms, people are coming at me because Martin Luther King would never have rioted or broken into a store and all that. So, okay, changing the subject. And I wrote back a quote that I just wrote down in this here. Here's what my sermon looks like today. It's a quote from Martin Luther King. A riot is the language of the unheard. Reverend Dr., son of a bishop, ordained minister himself, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., committed to nonviolence, said, a riot is the language of the unheard. He was not excusing his own riotous behavior. There's a difference between accepting or condoning something and understanding it. If I can't jog, sleep, birdwatch, walk down the street with a mask on to protect myself from COVID-19, living in a community and in a ethnic, racial minority in the country, in the housing projects or someplace where I can't escape, packed in tightly, and then that, in that context, that kind of a thing happens, and people are saying, oh, I can't believe they're rioting. Well, for the record, I and many, many other people are saying, no, that's wrong. Because what it does is it takes you away from the true issue. Why are we talking about rioting? Whether they're people who go in there because that's what they want to do, or they're from the radical left or the radical right who wants to stir up these protests so we can dismiss all of the protests because, like, a handful of them are doing this heinous act, burning down their own laundromat. Oh, that'll really cure racism. Burning down a store where your mother gets her fruit and vegetables and it's the only place within a half a mile. It's not going to do anything. We know that. Let's not change the subject. Instead of talking about rioting, why don't we talk about murder? Why don't we talk about systemic racism? Why don't we talk about another story about my daughter Celeste? We belonged to a church long before I had any idea I'd end up an ordained minister. We were sitting in this church, and my daughter was sitting next to me, and she was like maybe 6, let's say, and she looked up at me, and you know how kids don't know how to regulate their volume, and they don't know what to be ashamed of or to be quiet about. You whisper something about the large person in front of you. You don't shout it out. She said to me in a really loud voice, Dad, how come everybody in this church is white? We lived in Manhattan. She had 2 best friends. One, Malik, was a young African American, and then Ariana was young Latina. And that's typical New York. So white, Latina, African American. This church didn't look anything like her school, her city, her neighborhood. And we left that church. And when we went to another church, which is the Riverside Church in the city of New York, it was there that I decided I want to follow Jesus, who I do believe is the Christ. And I want to be baptized because I had never been in a church until I was 34 years old. So at the age of 43, I asked the Reverend Dr. James A. Forbes Jr., an African-American pastor of our church, to baptize me. And he did, by immersion, right there in the Riverside Church. Things change. Things take time to change. November 8th, 2008. Days or maybe a week, but I think days after the election of the first person of color to President of the United States of America. And a magazine cover said, "Are we in post-racial America?" That was 2008. Days after that election, Marcelo Lucero, an undocumented Latino immigrant from Ecuador, was accosted by 7 white teenagers from the local, well, one of them I think was biracial. 7 teenagers from the local high school. And he was killed. That hate crime sent ripples through the nation and in many parts of the world. I was interviewed by Korean television, Le Monde of Paris, a large newspaper in France. Many, many others. What's going on in America? What's going on in America? And Patchogue, Long Island, where I'm speaking to you from, Congregational Church of Patchogue, had gained a national and international reputation as a place where it's the center of hate crimes against Latinos. Now, this community then was 1/3 Latino. You'd never know it. People acted like it wasn't true. They just acted like it wasn't there. And I heard whispers of a resentment that a Latino family had opened a laundromat on Main Street and it was populated by people who didn't own a washer and dryer. Guess what? They were predominantly persons of color. They still are. Oh my God. They had the audacity to open a laundromat so they could wash their socks and underwear? And they're all brown? Well, what's happening to this community? And then the killing of Marcelo Lucero. In defense of our town, immediately people jumped into action. Immediately. Partly when there's a hate crime murder and you're a village, you don't ignore it. And there was a lot of accountability about how could we have missed this? What did we do wrong? The police department was investigated by the Department of Justice, and over 100 mandatory changes were imposed by the Department of Justice upon the Suffolk County Police Department. 100 required changes in the aftermath of the hate crime murder of Marcelo Lucero. I did the funeral. I presided over the funeral of Marcelo Lucero. It was held in our church. The casket was there. It took us 20 minutes to get the casket out of the building because it was so packed and it was so quiet in here. And it was so appreciated that we did this. And the whole community really came to life and came around. Now, does that mean that it's perfect here? No. I could tell you all sorts of things that I think could be better. I could tell you things about myself that could be better. But we leaned into it, stopped trying to explain it away, and said, what can we do to look at it? How can that happen here was one question. The other was, what did Marcelo Lucero do wrong to cause that? He didn't belong here because he was undocumented. If he wasn't here, he wouldn't have been murdered by teenagers. Okay. What are we supposed to do with that? Then ignore the murder? They felt so entitled, the teenagers. They didn't even hide the murder weapon. They were caught on Main Street, still together as a group, on Main Street, carrying the bloody knife. They didn't throw it in the bay. They would never have found that thing. Why? Because I don't think they thought anybody cared. He's only a Latino. And what's another black guy face down in the pavement with a white cop's knee on his neck. Now, clearly, this is not all police department people. I wrote on a piece of paper on the way over here this morning, when will we bury hate instead of each other? And another thing I wrote was, justice has a calm center, but a jagged edge. And when you allow things to percolate out the way they did, so that multiple cities in the country are burning multiple days in a row, and we're spending who knows how much money and how much pain, people ripping off their face masks in a crowded area because they want to be heard screaming about the injustice that they believe is being inflicted upon them. And they say, no more. If we had done this before, wouldn't we be in better shape? This is our opportunity. And the fact that it happened during COVID, I think, is what brought it to the fore so primally. Self-quarantining, living on canned beans. Okay, protecting others. We're going to protect everybody else from COVID, and then we watch one of our brothers dying on the street. It takes me back 2,000 years. I'm getting long here, I think, so I'm going to stop this here. 2,000 years ago, a guy named Paul, who we now call the Apostle Paul, was in jail. Again. He was in jail because he did what Marcelo Lucero did. He fought back. The reason why, it seems, Marcelo Lucero was murdered, as opposed to just beaten and humiliated like they'd been doing to Latinos for entertainment on Friday nights for months, was because he took off his coat, wrapped it around his arm, and fended off the knife attacks against 7 teenagers, was stabbed and died. He had the audacity to fight back. And now everybody's arguing whether George Floyd resisted arrest. So we can talk about resisting arrest, we can talk about rioters who smash out mom and pop grocery stores. Let's just not, if I was treated like that, if I didn't resist arrest, I would certainly be lipping off to those officers. I know it. The time has come to do what Paul did. While Paul was in jail, this other prisoner, he got a cellie, and the guy came in. He recognized Paul. I know you. You baptized me and my boss. What are you in jail for? Well, I ran away. He was a slave. He took something that belonged to his boss, and what he took that belonged to his boss was himself, because he was a piece of property. Paul wrote a letter to the man's owner and said, I baptized you, I baptized your slave. I want you to drop all charges, get him released, and welcome him back into your family as your brother. Now, oh, what a nice thing to do. Imagine somebody steals your car, and then you get a call from somebody who says, I want you to welcome this guy back into your family, have dinner with him, treat him like a brother, treat him like a member of your family, even though he stole your car or burned down your garage or something. It was a tall order, and he did it. And the tradition of the Christian scripture is that that guy, the slave who went back and was reunited, became the bishop of Ephesus, a city in what we call Turkey. He was Paul's brother. Paul knew that 2,000 years ago. It has been canonized in Christian scripture for 2,000 years. And yet, they still say that 11 a.m. on Sunday is the most segregated hour in America. We can do better, and we will do better. Next week, we may look at the racial, socio-economic, age issues surrounding COVID-19 so that we can learn from it. 50% of people die in nursing homes. We need to know about nursing homes. People of color, disproportionate. We need to know about that. We'll learn to lean into this instead of running away from it. We will accept it rather than deny it. We will transform any shame or anger into hope and healing and certitude and conviction to do the next right thing. I didn't want to preach this sermon this morning. I threw my sermon on the floor. But I preached what came from the heart. So from my heart to yours, we are all children of God. We are all children of God. May we behave so, and if we don't know how to, may we learn together. George Floyd. What if that was God in disguise coming to us with a message? The children that Mother Teresa brought in off the steps. Why do you keep saving these kids and bringing them in? They're dying and dying and dying and dying. They're left on your doorstep. Because look at this. This is a little baby, a little child of God. This is Jesus in disguise, she said. What if God was one of us and we're putting our knee on the neck of God because we don't like what God looks like or isn't saying or respecting us the way we think? What if God was one of us? What if God was one of us? Would we change? God is every one of us.
God had a name, what would it be, and would you call it to his face? If you were faced with him in all of his glory, what would you ask if you had just one question? And yeah, God is great. Yeah, God is good. Yeah. What if God was one of us? Just a slob like one of us. Just a stranger on the bus, trying to make his way home. If God had a face, what would it look like, and would you want to see it? If seeing meant that you would have to believe in things like heaven and Jesus and the saints and all of the prophets, and yeah, God is great. Yeah, God is good. Yeah. What if God was one of us? Just a slob like one of us. Just a stranger on the bus, trying to make his way home. He's trying to make his way home. Back up to heaven all alone. Nobody calling on the phone, except for the Pope maybe in Rome. except for the Pope, maybe in Rome.
Now that I dramatically threw everything on the floor, I need to retrieve something. Thank you, Craig, for that. He ain't heavy, he's my brother. She ain't heavy, she's my sister. What if God was one of us? Just a slob like one of us, trying to find our way home. See you next Sunday at 10 a.m. and then next Sunday evening at 7 p.m. The Spirituality of Cat Stevens, Yusuf, with Rory Kelly, Katie Pearlman, Toby Tobias, Dave March. Who am I missing? Dave March, Brian Gallo, Katie Pearlman, Rory Kelly, Toby Tobias, and a new add-on, the New Students. I love this band. I love this band. The New Students. Check them out. They've been doing something called Quarantune, a different song every day all through the quarantine. They're an amazing group. And they're going to be doing one of Cat Stevens songs for us next Sunday at 7. Pray God. Nah, not pray God. Let's promise this. There's going to be some wonderful things next week. You know why? Because there's some wonderful things right now. Wonderful things are coming of this. It takes what it takes. You do the next right thing, and then you find out that you indeed are a people of God, and you can move into this new reality. This world has divided in half. Before coronavirus and after coronavirus. It's the new ADBC. And look what we're learning. Not the way we want to learn it, but look what we're learning. What a blessing. Between now and when we meet again, may the light of God shine down upon you. May the light of God warm you. May the light of God shine out from within you, illuminating and radiating everyone who you meet on social media, in person, in your dreams. May we envision a world together. And may we all board the peace train. Justice, mercy, peace, and compassion to you all. Amen.